Empaths are signing a dark contract the moment they open their hearts. You think sharing someone's pain makes you noble, but every act of compassion draws invisible ink outlining a binding agreement with your unconscious. Imagine a ledger etched into your soul. Every feeling you absorb, every tear you catch, every unspoken sorrow becomes a debit on your vitality. You didn't read the fine print yet, the shadows are collecting their toll. From the first moment you feel another's fear, from the split second you mirror their grief. You begin trading pieces of yourself. You don't notice the subtle theft, a flicker of doubt here, a tightening in your chest there. Empaths believe they are healers, yet they become haunted by a hunger they cannot name. At night, fragments of borrowed emotions crawl beneath your eyelids. Loneliness that isn't your own, anger that burns like cold ash against your ribs. This isn't just poetic drama. Your unconscious is drafting terms in a language you haven't learned. Each empath's gift hides a contract of equal and dark weight. For every wave of compassion you ride, a silent fee is siphoned into a vault you cannot access. You become a vessel, and empathy transforms you into a vault itself, storing shadows and regrets that whisper in your mind. Every empath trades freedom for connection, and many empaths remain blind to their own vanished spark. Feel this, a courtroom in your chest, where past hurts you carried for others stand as prosecutors, harsh and unrelenting. You sit defenseless on the witness stand of your own psyche. You wonder why exhaustion sometimes overrides elation, why comforting a friend can leave you feeling hollow, why kindness feels like a debt you can never repay. Those are not random sorrows. They are clauses in the dark contract your empathic heart has accepted. Stop and look into your own reflection. Can you see the fine print creeping across your skin, ledger lines snaking beneath your veins? The real question lurks just beyond your conscious horizon. What price are you paying for your compassion? Your empathic superpower feels like boundless generosity, yet it conceals a ledger of shadows that grow heavier with every act of kindness. You wear sensitivity like a cloak of feathers, light, comforting, almost sacred. Yet beneath its softness lies a hidden void that grows wider with every emotional gust you absorb. As an empath, your heightened antennae tune into frequencies others can't perceive, subtle tremors of sorrow, faint echoes of anger, minute pulses of joy. You believe this innate gift is your greatest strength. But what if that very strength conceals a yawning chasm within your own psyche? Picture standing on the edge of a glass cliff. Each time you lean forward to catch someone's tears, you inch closer to a fracture you cannot see. You pride yourself on holding space for colleagues who crumble under pressure. Yet the more you cradle their burdens, the more your own foundation trembles. You're the empath everyone trusts to listen, to soothe, to offer solace. But those same open channels flood your inner world with currents you cannot fully navigate. Soon, your compassion decants into your soul like acid corroding boundaries you once thought unbreakable. This is the haunting paradox of empathic power. The more you give, the more you risk becoming hollow. Your heart amplifies every emotion it encounters like a microphone turned up to deafening levels. One moment you bask in the warmth of a friend's gratitude. The next, you're engulfed by their despair as though you swallowed an iceberg. Empaths often mistake their echoing emptiness for empathy fatigue, unaware that something deeper is at play. Here's the rub. Your gift of sensitivity doesn't just reflect others' feelings, it traps them in your bloodstream. Those unclaimed emotions accumulate like dead leaves in a neglected pond, breeding stagnation. And when the pond overflows, you drown in borrowed grief. You've tried self-care routines, mindfulness apps, even weekend retreats, but the void persists. It yawns wider, an echo chamber that magnifies every whisper of pain you've ever taken on. Have you ever found yourself crying at a news report, though you barely knew the victim? Have you felt inexplicable rage toward a stranger's injustice, as if it were your own scar being reopened? Those visceral reactions aren't random. They are the markers of an empathic contract gone unconscious. You accepted terms you never fully grasped, trading your own emotional stability for the ability to feel more deeply than most. Now ask yourself the great question. Have you ever wondered why your own compassion sometimes feels like a trap? It's not that you lack strength, it's that you wield your strength without a map. You navigate the emotional terrain of others with uncanny skill, but you have no compass for the wilderness inside you. Every path you carve into someone else's heart is an uncharted trail leading back into your own subconscious labyrinth, where shadows shift and resentments gather like stones. In this paradox lies your danger. By mistaking surplus sensitivity for unassailable power, you blind yourself to the void expanding within. You become an empath who can sense every heartbeat in a crowded room, yet you can't detect the hollow echo in your own chest. That void whispers in silence, but you're too busy answering cries from the outside world to notice the plea from within. This hidden emptiness doesn't just threaten your emotional equilibrium, it erodes your identity. Without clear boundaries, you risk losing touch with your own desires, beliefs, and dreams. You wake up wondering whose thoughts are yours and whose are borrowed. Relationships blur into a mosaic of others' projections, and you stand at the center feeling disoriented, untethered. The empath's paradox is this: your gift is both a bridge and a barrier. It connects you to humanity's rawest emotions, yet it can isolate you from your own truth. Until you confront the hidden void, every act of kindness will be tinged with the risk of self-erasure. You must learn to see the fine print in the contract your heart signed long ago, before the void consumes the light that once guided you. Imagine you as Elena, an empath whose life has always been a tapestry woven from the emotions of others. From your earliest memories, you sensed the unspoken grief of your mother long before she cried. You felt the pressure of your father's silent disappointment seep into your skin. As a child, your playground friendships were both sanctuary and snare. You'd pick up the anxieties of classmates fretting over math tests, only to enter your bedroom at night, trembling with a fear that wasn't truly yours. You thought this was normal. In fact, you believed it was your special gift. By your 20s, you'd honed this gift. In your first job as a hospice volunteer, you soothed dying patients with a presence that felt like home. You sensed their unuttered regrets and whispered assurances you barely understood yourself. Colleagues marveled at your ability to hold space. You thought you'd found your calling. But unknown to you, your unconscious mind was drafting clauses in an agreement you hadn't read. Each tear you dried and each burden you carried was being stored in the vault of your psyche. The turning point came when you met Martin, a terminal patient whose despair was more corrosive than even your deepest fears. When you sat beside him, you felt not only his sorrow, but the raw hatred he'd harbored toward his estranged son. You carried both emotions back to your apartment. Martin's grief crushed your chest, and his anger lodged like a shard in your heart. That night you awoke screaming not for yourself, but for him. You couldn't distinguish your terror from his. Soon you began to notice cracks in your daily life. You arrived at work weary, as though you'd run a marathon in your sleep. You snapped at friends over minor disagreements, bewildered by the intensity of your own rage. And at home, silence became unbearable. Every quiet moment felt like a drum of doom echoing inside you. You tried meditation apps and yoga immersions, but peace eluded you. Your unconscious was repaying its debt, calling in shadows you hadn't realized you'd incurred. It all spiraled when you met Lena, a colleague distraught over a toxic relationship. You spent nights on the phone offering empathy and guidance. Within hours of hanging up, you were plagued by guilt over something you'd never done, to the point where you confessed imaginary betrayals in dreams. You started waking up at dawn with tears tracking down your cheeks, but when you investigated, there was no reason to cry. These phantom emotions were Lena's betrayals replayed in your neural pathways, as though authored by your own hand. One afternoon, your body rebelled. You collapsed in the break room with a racing heart and a dizzy fog. Doctors found nothing wrong. No virus, no anemia, but you felt pregnant with parasites of emotion. Your unconscious mind had become a predator feeding on your vitality. You realized that every moment you spent absorbing others' darkness was like signing away a fragment of yourself. At your lowest point, you sat in your apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes. You'd decided to quit hospice work, convinced you'd failed in your one true purpose. You couldn't stand the weight of other people's suffering. Tears streamed down your face, but this time they were your own raw, unfiltered sorrow that you'd starved for years beneath layers of borrowed feelings. In that instant, you saw the ledger beneath your skin, endless entries of pain and confusion with your own name scrawled at the bottom. Then came a breakthrough. You discovered the concept of the empathic firewall, a term from a contemporary psychotherapist's essay that described boundaries as not walls, but filters, like the gills of a fish, allowing water emotions in while filtering out the toxins. You realized that your unconscious mind had been retracting your boundaries so slowly you hadn't noticed until they collapsed. You also learned about shadow contracts, commitments made deep in the psyche without conscious consent. That phrase struck you like lightning. You had been co-signing agreements with the unconscious every time you relieved someone's pain. With this insight, you began a new journey. You asked for help from a therapist versed in Jungian shadow work. In sessions, you laid out your story, every patient, friend, stranger whose emotions you'd stored. You confronted each credit of compassion you'd claimed and the debits they incurred in your life. You visualized signing each page of that ledger as genuine consent, then practiced tearing up those pages, reclaiming your power. Slowly, you rebuilt your empathic capacity. You learned to recognize the difference between genuine allyship and unconscious absorption. When you sat with someone in pain, you practiced a breathing technique that anchored you in your own body, counting 4 beats in, 4 beats out, so you could feel their sorrow without draining your own reserves. You began to say no softly but firmly when you sensed your limits. You scheduled decompression breaks after every emotionally taxing session, using journaling prompts to release what wasn't yours. Months later, you returned to hospice work, but you walked in with a new ritual before entering a patient's room. You imagined donning an invisible cloak filtered with light. That mental exercise became your empathic firewall. When you left, you pictured shedding that cloak in a designated release zone, a corner of the facility restroom painted sky blue, where you exhaled, shook your hands, and named any lingering emotions out loud. This belongs to Martin. This belongs to Lena. Then you walked away. You felt lighter. Today, you stand stronger still, an empath, but no longer a vessel for unconscious shadows. Your story shows that an empath's unconscious mind can betray even the most loving heart. Yet with conscious work, you can transform that betrayal into liberation. The void no longer threatens to engulf you because you learn to rewrite the fine print of your own empathic contract. Beneath every empath's surface, a silent symphony conducts the dance of consciousness and the unconscious. You as an empath straddle 2 worlds, the tangible realm of daily life and the shadowy domains that Jung called the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. This terrain is rich with archetypes, universal symbols that resonate across cultures and epochs. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You feel this truth every time emotions surge through you uninvited, as though fate itself had flicked the switch. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on his experiences in a concentration camp, noted that humans carry a tragic optimism. We find meaning even in suffering. Empaths magnify this paradox. You not only endure your own suffering, but also cull meaning from the suffering of others. Nietzsche observed, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." You as an empath link your why to the emotional states of those around you, tethering existential meaning to external sources. When their meaning falters, yours quakes. Modern research on mirror neurons illuminates how empathy operates biologically. These specialized neurons fire when you perform an action, and when you observe someone else performing that action. They're the brain's wiring for emotional resonance. In empaths, this system is hyper-responsive. Your neural circuits ripple in sympathy with every emotion you witness. But if mirror neurons are overactive, the lines blur between your feelings and those you absorb. Neurobiology thus confirms what psychology intuited: an empath's nervous system can be a double-edged sword, amplifying connection but also vulnerability. Jung's concept of the shadow reveals how unconscious aspects of the psyche, rejected impulses, desires, and memories lurk beneath the conscious mind. For empaths, the shadow often consists of the very emotions they absorb but fail to integrate. Nietzsche warned of pouring out your essence unto others and finding your own bottle drained dry. When you absorb a friend's unprocessed rage, their shadow takes refuge in your psyche. If you never acknowledge or integrate that rage, it festers, becoming a part of your own shadow. One you project outward as inexplicable irritability or self-doubt. A contemporary study in the Journal of Personality found that empaths experience higher baseline cortisol levels, indicating chronic stress responses. Researchers noted that empathic distress arises when empathy lacks self-other distinction, when caregivers over-identify with care recipients, leading to burnout and compassion fatigue. This parallels Jungian exhaustion, a form of psychic overload, where your unconscious demands restitution for unacknowledged debts. Socially, empaths carry an invisible weight. In relationships, you often assume the role of emotional caretaker, a repository for unexpressed pain. While loved ones may praise your sensitivity, they unconsciously offload burdens onto you, reinforcing the dark contract. Jung emphasized individuation, the process of becoming your own person, by integrating all parts of the psyche, including the shadow. For empaths, individuation means disentangling your emotional identity from the mosaic of others' feelings. It requires conscious boundary setting, a concept rooted in both analytical psychology and attachment theory. Attachment theory describes how early relationships shape your emotional regulation. If you grew up in an environment where expressing vulnerability was discouraged, you might have honed empathic skills to decode others' needs without explicit communication. This adaptation, once protective, can become maladaptive if left unchecked. You internalize others' distress to maintain connection, sacrificing self-coherence. Over time, you lose the thread linking your emotions to your own experiences. A phenomenon Jung called psychic entropy, the diminishing of psychic energy due to disordered inner life. To counter this, Carl Jung advocated active imagination, a dialogue with unconscious contents through symbols, art, or journaling. By engaging with shadow material intentionally, you transform unconscious debts into conscious assets. When you write down a troubling emotion that arose after helping a friend, you grant it a name and a time frame. You allocate it to the true source, preventing it from becoming an orphan in your psyche. This practice remaps your empathic wiring, reinforcing self-other boundaries at a neurological level. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy suggests that finding personal meaning in suffering, rather than simply reducing distress, provides lasting resilience. For empaths, this means reframing empathy, not as a burden, but as a chosen vocation. You ask, why do I serve others? What values propel me? When guided by conscious purpose, you enact empathy from a position of strength rather than depletion. Nietzsche would nod approvingly at this will to power the creative force within you that molds raw experience into purposeful action. Integrating these theories, you see that empathic resilience arises at the intersection of biology, psychology, and spirituality. Your mirror neurons hum in harmony with a regulated nervous system. Conscious boundaries shield your core, and active imagination feeds your individuation. Only then does empathy become sustainable rather than sacrificial. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your unconscious mind no longer masquerades as fate when you harness these insights. You reclaim the authority to negotiate with your shadows, rewrite dark contracts, and steer your empathic gift toward empowerment rather than erosion. The map through this wilderness lies in shadow work, boundary cultivation, and meaning-making, three pillars that support the empath's journey from debt-laden vulnerability to sovereign compassion. Beneath the surface of even the most radiant empath lies an undercurrent of hidden costs tolls that accumulate silently until they demand payment in moments of crisis. You may appear vibrant and compassionate on the outside, but inside your psyche is running a deficit budget, siphoning energy to compensate for the emotional weight you've amassed. Each unacknowledged sorrow, every guilt-laden smile you've given registers in your unconscious as a balance owed. And when the bill arrives, it can manifest as anxiety, depression, or chronic burnout that no spa day can alleviate. Imagine a reservoir drained drop by drop over years. You might not notice until the last bucket is empty until your usual well of resilience runs dry. In a study of mental health professionals, 68% reported symptoms of compassion fatigue after sustained empathic engagement with clients' traumas. They described waking with a groggy heaviness, as though they'd slept inside someone else's nightmare. This isn't anecdotal. It's a measurable phenomenon that mirrors the empath's shadow, contract unpaid emotional labor that demands restitution in the form of psychic pain and exhaustion. First-hand accounts reveal deeper dangers. One empathic nurse recounted how after years of caring for terminal patients, she began experiencing episodes of depersonalization, feeling detached from her own body, as if she were merely observing her life through a screen. She later learned that her unconscious mind had merged her identity with her patient's suffering, erasing the boundary between caregiver and self. When she finally recognized her lost sense of self-therapy helped her reconstruct a personal identity independent of others' pain. Beyond professional contexts, empaths often negotiate risky terrain in personal relationships. You might find yourself in friendships or partnerships with chronic worriers, narcissists, or unresolved codependents, those who unconsciously view you as their emotional safety net. A documented case involved an empath in a decade-long friendship with someone who repeatedly broke boundaries, borrowing money, venting trauma, and demanding emotional labor without reciprocity. The empath's compassion masked the friendship's toxicity until he collapsed from adrenal fatigue at age 34, prompting an emergency hospitalization. There are physical ramifications too. Chronic stress from empathic overload elevates cortisol, which over time contributes to hypertension, impaired immune function, and even hippocampal shrinkage areas of the brain, critical for memory and emotional regulation. You might dismiss your pounding heart as caffeine or your foggy thinking as fatigue, but these could be signposts of deeper empathic debt. Then there's the social fallout. When you continuously prioritize others' needs, your own goals slip through the cracks. Ambitions you once held, writing a novel, starting a business, embarking on solo travel, collect dust as you perpetually reschedule to accommodate someone else's crisis. Your empathic heart, intended as a source of connection, becomes an anchor chaining you to stifling patterns. The result is resentment, fermenting beneath polite facades, eroding the authenticity that once defined you. Worst of all is the silent erosion of self-agency. When your unconscious mind directs your actions more than your conscious will, you become reactive rather than proactive. You might catch yourself saying yes reflexively, then wondering whose desires you're serving. The empathic firewall you once thought impenetrable. Your resolve, your boundaries, your sense of purpose crumbles under the weight of ignored shadows. You lose trust in your own inner compass, mistaking others' distress signals for your own urgent calls. This is the grave price of an unseen contract, your autonomy traded for perpetual caretaking, your vitality drained in invisible installments, your identity diluted until you barely recognize yourself. You don't have to wait for collapse to renegotiate these terms. Your unconscious mind is draining your inner power right now, but if you listen carefully, you can hear the starting whistle, a tightening in your chest, a hesitation before you speak, a flicker of fear when you contemplate alone time. That subtle alarm is your empathic signal, a call to reclaim what has always been yours. The unseen consequences are real, but they are not irreversible. By acknowledging the debt, you stop the accumulation. By setting conscious boundaries, you freeze the unpaid invoices in your unconscious ledger. By seeking restoration through rest, ritual, and reflection, you begin to repay past debts with self-directed compassion. Silence rings like an alarm bell for empaths, a deep resonant tolling that warns you when your empathic firewall is faltering. Picture standing in a vast echoing hall where every footstep reverberates through empty chambers. This is your inner world, when unguarded sound waves of other people's anguish bounce unchecked, drowning out the still small voice of your own intuition. But silence need not be a prison. It can become a bridge to self-preservation and empowerment. First, practice the shield of light visualization. Before entering an emotionally charged situation, be it a tense meeting at work or a heated family dinner, close your eyes and imagine a luminous bubble forming around you. See each breath draw pure energy inward, then exhale a protective glow that solidifies your boundaries. At work, this allowed you to listen to a distraught coworker mourning a failed project without internalizing their fear. You observed their tears from within your bubble, not beneath them, and offered practical guidance rather than absorbing their panic. Second, cultivate a compassion ledger. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to journal 3 entries. One emotion you felt its source, and whether it was yours or borrowed. For example, today I felt overwhelming dread after talking with Nina. This was Nina's dread, not mine. By assigning each feeling to its rightful owner, you shift from unconscious absorption to conscious bookkeeping. In your friendship with a chronic worrier, this practice prevented you from rescheduling your weekend plans every time she phoned in distress. You recognized her worry as hers, recorded it, then refocused on your own hopes. Third set, boundary timeouts. When someone begins unloading emotional baggage, gently interject, "I want to support you, but I need a 10-minute pause to center myself first." Use that break to step outside, take a brisk walk, or sip water while grounding yourself in the present moment. In a leadership role, you found that inserting these micro pauses during team debriefs reduced your anxiety spikes and improved your ability to offer clear-headed solutions rather than empathetic overwhelm. Fourth embrace, reciprocal rituals. Empaths often give more than they receive. Establish small exchanges of care after you listen to a friend's crisis request, a check-in about your day later that week. This teaches others to honor your emotional labor. With your spouse, you introduced a weekly emotion share ritual. Each of you speaks for 3 minutes about your inner experience, while the other listens without interruption, balancing the emotional scales in your marriage, transforming a one-sided drain into mutual nourishment. Fifth, anchor yourself with nature contracts. Choose a natural element, a potted plant on your desk, a river you pass on your commute as a silent ally. Whenever you feel other people's emotions overwhelming you, touch the plant's leaves or imagine dipping your fingers in the river's current. Feel its grounding presence remind you that you are part of a living ecosystem that supports your own cyclical ebb and flow. When a client's trauma began to feel like your own, placing your hand on a smooth stone in your garden reminded you that you have roots of your own to nourish. Silence then becomes your most potent tool. The pause before absorption, the moment when you choose whether to open the gates or hold them fast. By visualizing a shield of light, keeping a compassion ledger, instituting boundary timeouts, fostering reciprocal rituals, and anchoring yourself in nature contracts, you turn silence into a bridge rather than a wall. You transform quiet vigilance into active preservation, ensuring that your empathic heart remains radiant instead of hollow. You have the power to renegotiate the fine print of your empathic contract, now with conscious strategies at your command. You can walk forward unafraid, knowing you control both the giving and the receiving. You have traveled from the darkness of unspoken contracts to the light of conscious boundaries. The ultimate truth chills the empath's spine. Your compassion can either construct a prison of borrowed pain or build a sanctuary of shared humanity. Choice lies in your hands. When you recognize that every tear you absorb is an invoice from your unconscious, you reclaim the pen to rewrite those terms. Your empathic gift need not cost you your essence. With the strategies you've learned, you stand sovereign over your own emotional kingdom. Now breathe deeply and feel the difference. The silence between heartbeats is no longer a void, but a space teeming with your authentic voice. You are both healer and steward, guiding empathy with intention rather than surrendering to every wave. When the next crisis approaches, watch for the tolling bell of silence and answer it with your shield of light. If this journey resonated with you, if you've ever wondered why your own compassion sometimes feels like a trap, comment below and share your story. Hit subscribe and join our community of empaths reclaiming their power. Like this video if you're ready to renegotiate your empathic contract, and subscribe to stay connected as we explore more shadow work and self-mastery together. Share this with a fellow empath who needs to hear that compassion doesn't have to come at the cost of their soul. Step into your sovereignty. Walk in empathy with your heart intact. The shadows may lurk, but you hold the lantern.